Hello, this is Mario Serafero, editor-in-chief at XDADevelopers.com. Welcome to the latest episode of the XDA Android podcast. Our goal is to discuss the latest in Android tech news from an enthusiast perspective. We have a lot of topics this week, and I'm joined here today by people from Reddit.
Hi, I'm Corey Fiak. I'm from the Android subreddit, and I'm also an Android developer.
And Daniel Marchena from the Android subreddit as well.
So we had a bit of a surprise today as there was a big announcement. The Android N developer preview just randomly dropped today, and there's been a lot of looking into that. There's some really interesting features. The headliner is obviously the multi-window support that's been announced for that. They also have double tapping the home button to get to your last application. I kind of view that as like an alt-tab to the Android interface. Pull-on settings that look very similar to the Samsung quick settings. There's some various DOS improvements, being able to have DOS kick in when it's in your pocket with the screen off. Granular notification settings on a per-app basis, and then some other settings improvements, suggestions and alerts. A lot of stuff. I heard you're able to get your hands on onto this preview, Daniel.
Yeah, so thankfully I kept my trusty Nexus 6 around, and I did flash the N preview on it earlier today, and I actually went ahead and did something I usually don't do and went the OTA route. I signed up for the new Android beta sign up. And it was pretty seamless. It recognized my device because it was registered to my Google account, and then pushed the update over once I got home and hit. Actually, once I turned my phone back on, the notification was there within 5 minutes or so. So I've been running the preview for probably the past 3 or actually, gosh, it's 11 o'clock already. I've been running the preview now for 5 or 6 hours. So what questions do you guys have regarding it? I guess we'll kind of handle it the same way we did the Galaxy S7 last week.
Well, I think the first thing that everyone's going to be curious about is the multi-window support. Obviously, that's one of the biggest features. What have your thoughts been playing around with that, especially comparing it to previous implementations like Samsung?
Okay, so I'm actually really impressed with it. Now, Mario and I were going back and forth about this earlier, and I'm sure we're going to have a pretty lively discussion about it today as well, regarding how they handle it in comparison to Samsung. I really like the interface that Google chose for multi-window. One of the things that I haven't seen actually covered, and hopefully we're kind of covering this for the first time, is there's an option in the UI tuner to enable the ability to slide up from the multitasking button to go right into the multi-window mode. So if you see, I'll just touch in the back, but the multi-app, and then I now have my recent apps down here. I can go ahead and select whichever application I want to put into the bottom, and then it goes ahead and goes right into multi-mode. You can see there that it didn't fully work. I was trying to go into Chromer, I think. And it looks like Chromer didn't support it for some weird reason. But if I go into Maps, I've got Google Maps. It supports, there's a flag you can enable that will allow you to choose any application. We'll just work with it regardless of whether it has code for it or not. So you'll probably break some apps, you'll probably break some UI things. But again, this is, it's clearly marketed as an alpha from Google. But you'll notice in the middle you have the pull here, if I can go ahead and grab that. Very similar to Samsung, where you've got the ability to resize it and it rescales. One of my favorite things compared to Samsung, and I don't know if this is something they changed on Marshmallow, is if you want to go ahead and pull an app and make it full screen. So let's say I have Google Maps on the bottom and I want to make it the full screen app. You just swipe it all the way to the top, and it automatically closes the app that you weren't in, and then makes it your full screen app. And then you can go and you can swipe up from recents again, and then pop back up Google Plus, on the bottom. So that's one of the things that I really, really liked about it. It has glitches, it has bugs. Like you can see my status bar is stuck to the color of the last app that I had on top. Some little things there are buggy. But I'm really impressed with where they are, being that it's still so early in multi-window.
Yeah. I definitely think that Google has managed a more static implementation. I think that the animations are really smooth. I think that the way the windows resize, the way they scroll up from the bottom, from the top, I think that all of that looks really, really neat. Even the way things get rearranged seems to work pretty well, which admittedly didn't always work so well with Samsung. Especially if you try something like a game, something that is more hard-coded to an aspect ratio, then all hell would break loose. But then again, you weren't supposed to do that. I'm just saying this by enabling multi-window support for all applications with custom ROMs and stuff. But then this again is built into the operating system, and it supports so many apps by default. And then the developers have further options to customize the scaling to make sure that nothing breaks. So it did change in Android Marshmallow. Daniel, you referred to Samsung multitasking. Samsung's multitasking on Note 5 did do that. In fact, I remember many frustrations because, for example, I would be listening before YouTube read. I wanted to listen to something in the background, and I would have YouTube on top and whatever it was in the bottom, and I would like try to scroll the bottom page up, but if I scrolled it too much, it would become full screen and the video would stop. It's actually sad because Marshmallow, as I've tried it in the Note 5 with the preview build that we covered a while ago, and as it appears on the S7 Edge and the S7, they actually gimped the multi-window. I'm not happy about this at all. The reason I liked the Note 5 and TouchWiz multi-window, but particularly on the Note 5 because it was the most refined version up until that point, was because it was not the most fluid thing, but it allowed you a lot of control. It gave you so many options to enter multi-window. You could enter multi-window from the Recents menu. You could enter multi-window by long pressing the Recents button and then having your most recent apps. And if you swipe to the side, you also have the card stack. You could choose it from the card stack itself, like I said. You could also resize windows and you could move them around. You could combine them. If you had a window open and a mini window or a bubble and you would put it to the top or bottom, it would become multi-window with that. It just gave you a lot of control. Mm-hmm. From what I gather, Android Marshmallow on TouchWiz devices, TouchWiz on Android Marshmallow TouchWiz, rather, actually messed that up. For example, the order of multi-window icons is not longer ordered by your most recent or your most used applications with multi-window, and you can no longer use the card stack in that mini selection screen at the bottom half. Mm-hmm. All of that is lost, and again, it seems that Google took a clue from that because they actually are taking notes from Samsung. Obviously, Samsung has been in this game for a while, and I'm actually hoping that Samsung implements Google's aesthetic and Google's system with some refinements, of course, with their upcoming releases.
Yeah, I think the important thing, you mentioned quite a few features that Samsung has had that this Google implementation doesn't have, but it's important to remember that this is a developer preview. It's the first go at it, and what we're seeing here is a very intentional, methodical approach by Google to focus on the design, focus on the user experience, and know that maybe they don't have feature parity with a solution like what Samsung has refined over so many years of doing it. But they want to make sure they've got the experience down, and I fully expect we can see additional features in the future. But I'm so far very impressed with what they've been able to put together with this developer preview.
Yeah, I'm very impressed as well. And, coming from a consumer, I've used Note devices since the Note 3 was my first one. I've used every Note device and every Galaxy S flagship device since that point as well. And you're right, Mario. They did remove a lot of features in Marshmallow. I think part of that was to just remove some confusion from, the typical user. But in the process, they made it a little bit more difficult for the power user. Sure. But it's important that we make a distinction between the two different kinds of, multitasking that Samsung does. You've got your multi-window, which is just one app on top of another, and one on the top, one on the bottom. Then you've got your floating window, and and what AOSP or Google's doing is they're not even touching floating windows. But they're going right after that multi-window that Samsung had really good before, but really botched, I think, in Marshmallow.
Yeah, so on that point, Samsung had a huge problem when they released the Note 3, and it was the fact that they had pen window. It was not called floating window back then, it was called pen window, because you could only trigger those floating windows with the pen. It was ridiculous, because if you wanted a floating little window, you had to take out the pen, activate the air command, select the floating window, draw a square, choose your application, and wait for it to load.
That was the worst.
That was the worst. Yeah. With the Note 4,
It wasn't much better. It was still pretty rough.
Yeah.
It was rough.
And with the Note 4, it was still a little rough. But you could at least, it began what I thought is really smart implementation, which is swiping from the corner. In the Note 4, there was a lot of accidental triggering. It was not the most fluid thing. But the Note 5, I think, nailed it. And this is a distinction I want to make because you say that they're two separate things. And it is true. But because Samsung managed to combine them in such a good way with the Note 5's, the best multi-window implementation, which is sad because Marshmallow on TouchWiz Marshmallow completely botched that. I just don't know how or why. But it was the best implementation because you could grab those windows, you could shrink them, you could move them around, you could make them little bubbles so that they wouldn't annoy you. But then you could also swipe them up to make it a multi-window. You could grab a multi-window and turn it into a floating window with just a couple taps, and then you could put it on the side. You could do all sorts of things. You could resize really easily. All of these things are fundamentally different from what Google's doing because Google is only allowing you to do 2 apps at once. Mm-hmm. But what Samsung did is completely different. In my opinion, it allowed you to think of applications as you would think Windows in a desktop operating system, with the huge advantage that this system was optimized for touch and for thumb usage for the most part, because you swipe with the thumb, you control everything with thumb.
Yeah, I agree with you. It does have a lot of negatives, though. You've only got 5.5 inches of screen real estate to play with, so having multiple applications open at one time is kind of annoying. And the other problem too, though, is when you're using a floating window, you keep the aspect ratio of the app, which means you really can't go much more than actually a quarter of the screen if you want to pop up your keyboard and still see what you're doing. Yeah. And, in Marshmallow, it seems like they did split it where, floating apps is separate from multi-window, whereas in the Note 5, they were kind of one and the same. Now they're very different, as you really can't get a bubble window to go into multi-window without having an application open behind it, which does kind of stink. And one of the things I love about what Google did with N, is you can just swipe up and then... Now it's one fluid motion, a swipe and a tap, and now you've got 2 apps on top of each other. So they made it a little bit easier. It's nowhere near as powerful as Samsung's implementation of it, but I think it's still really good. And again, it's still an alpha release, like Corey had mentioned.
Yeah. One of the things I sincerely don't like about the current implementation is the way in which you choose applications. I think that Samsung's application choosing method for multi-window, at least when long pressing the recents menu, again, you had many ways to do it, and that was part of the brilliant part of it. But the fact that when you press the multitasking button, you would enter a screen with your most recently used apps, at least on the Note 5, and you had the icons, all of them for you to see. Contrast with the other offer that they offered as well, which was the Recents menu stack card, which has you scrolling to find just what you want and make it multi-window. I don't think that's optimal. I think that if you use certain apps for multi-window really frequently, they should be the ones that are there, and they should just be one tap away. No scrolling, no reading, no finding, no mental processing to find exactly what you want. And that, I think, the system might be more fluid because it's just a swipe and then just some swipes. But at the same time, there is a level of human cognitive processing that is just not what is on the Note 5. Because you actually have to think and look and be very mindful of where you're scrolling, what you have to select. Whereas this, you just long press and then you tap the icon you want and that's it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. But on the flip side of that, it is kind of nice that if, like, for instance, we were talking before in Hangouts and you sent me a link to an image and it opened up in Chroma, and all I did was open Chroma and then swipe up from Recents and then tap Hangouts. And I had my most recent application and the application I was just opening. Whereas with Samsung, if Chroma wasn't one of my frequently used apps, I might have had to swipe through a couple of pages before I actually got to that and selected it. So, I think there's definite positives to both sides. I think Samsung removing the card stack altogether from multi-view is definitely a step backwards.
That would be a solution because it would function in the same way.
Exactly. You can have your recent applications or your most used in multitasking. Right. So, I think it's just different strokes for different folks. It's kind of different ways of doing the same thing. I think both implementations are fantastic, and they're both way better than what Apple's currently offering with the iPads, where you've got like this tile thing that comes out from the side and every single app gets dumped in there, and it's just an absolute mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, definitely going to keep an eye on that feature. But the other feature that's really got me interested, I'm wondering if you can walk through it a little bit for us, Daniel, is the granular notification settings.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite things. Now, I always found Marshmallow notification settings to be kind of confusing. Can one of you guys send me a Hangout message, by the way, so I can kind of show this on screen? So in the new pull down, you've got the ability to, and you've seen this, people, you can't really see it on because my camera's not really adjusting, but you've got a Hangout message and you've got the ability to reply in line. And when you have multiple notifications, you can do like normal where you kind of swipe them together and unswipe to expand your options. It works a lot better and exactly as you would expect it to, as opposed to Marshmallow where sometimes it would get kind of confusing. But the feature I was telling you about is when you swipe over to the side and you get the little settings button on the side, and you tap that, you now have this new granular slider. And it allows you to choose what kind of notifications you want this app to do. So you've got, the urgent importance peek onto the screen, so it's got the peek feature and allow sound. The middle is silently show these notifications, and then you've got blocked, and then you've got low importance where it shows up on the, the bottom of your stack. One of my favorite things about this, though, is I've noticed that applications are no longer appearing in the status bar if they have, I think it's like a 50% or less ranking on this. So for people like me who like to keep their status bars clean, you don't have, Google Play notifications. Hey, you've got 2 apps that need to be updated and 10 others that were just updated. So now you have 2 icons in your status bar. So a lot of those things were cleaned up. In N, and that's one of my favorite features because in Marshmallow it's frankly confusing when you go into notification settings and you've got like 4 or 5 toggles, allow this but don't allow this but don't allow that. It's all kind of confusing, and I actually never granularly controlled my notifications, but that's one of my favorite features of this N preview. I certainly hope that it lasts through into the final versions.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I also noticed about the preview, and this is something I love, is the fact that they are making so many things more information rich. You've got the settings menu, we'll talk about that in a sec, but I also noticed that the notifications themselves, you can see a lot more in the notification when you open them, and there's the fact that you can also reply straight from the notification panel and the idea is to make it compatible with many more applications, not just stuff like Hangouts, and even then it's even better. I think that this is a step in the right direction. I think that Google has been wasting their screen space, their screen real estate for a while now, and they're finally making use of it with this. Even the notification panel and toggles, they're making really good use of that. The fact that you have the toggles right there, for example, when you do the notification here on Lollipop, you have this thing over here. And for the most part, it's wasted space because these little icons, you can't actually access them. You can look at them, but you don't see, for example, you can't actually go straight to your battery. You have to do one more pull down. You can't toggle or disable the Wi-Fi. All of these things that I think they require extra taps, and there's just not a very good use of screen real estate in my opinion. It seems that they're doing a very good job on Android N, which I'm really happy they're doing this, especially in the settings again, because sometimes you go on the settings not just to actually change things, but to see what the setting is. And the fact that they're already showing you some of the most important settings right there in the settings menu, I think is brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm looking through it right now with the settings, and you do have the information rich, and again, my camera's really not going to show it, but you can see on the top, you've got Wi-Fi. It tells you what Wi-Fi network you're connected to, Bluetooth. Mm-hmm. If you're connected to a Bluetooth device, if I turn it on, it'll probably connect to my TV soundbar. Mm-hmm. But it'll tell you what device you're connected to. Data usage shows how much data usage you've had. Ringer volume, on the Ringer volume, your storage, it now shows how much storage you're actually using, memory, users who are signed in, all that kind of stuff. And you're right, they're using a lot of they're using a lot of space that used to be wasted to now show you information really quick on the fly. And I hope that some of the information is going to be adjustable. For instance, on my display, it says display adaptive brightness is on. But maybe I want to see what my screen timeout is. So maybe if you're changing something frequently, it'll adjust to what you have instead of just showing a random fact that's inside of that settings menu.
Absolutely. I think it's an interesting theme that you've discovered, Mario, is that to me, this Android N is about taking our devices and having the operating system catch up to the fact that we've got larger display devices. We've got screens that have a significantly higher resolution than 4 years ago. And the operating system was designed for, a 4.5-inch screen with a 720p display, and hasn't changed much since then. Now that we've got all this additional size and additional resolution, let's get the operating system up to speed. Let's have richer display of information, and I think that's going to be a big theme. And that's even plays true for the multi-window support that they've added. Yeah. It's clearly a theme for Android N.
Yeah. So you guys, you guys know, and I'm sure that everyone that listens to the podcast knows, I'm usually more critical than I'm positive when it comes to new things, new phones. I tend to look at the faults, and I tend to give credit where it's due. But a lot of people think that I bring up the bad points more often. I actually think that if you guys remember when Marshmallow came out, I was actually pretty negative about many things, especially the fact that Google was focusing so much on Google services more so than the user experience. I think that Android N is completely changing that. It's turning that on its head, and I'm really, really pleased to see that Google is finally, like you said, making use of that real estate, that Google is finally getting rid of the white space, that Google is finally allowing for more control in the notifications, granular settings, that Google is finally allowing you to customize many aspects of the user interface, that they actually baking in finally a dark mode and a night mode, and the fact that they're also pushing with their latest Android support library, they're pushing this day and night themes for applications to toggle them really easily. That could very well come synergize with this dark mode thing. And the fact that we're also seeing finally the fruition of multi-window. I think that Android N is a huge upgrade in terms of user experience, and it feels that it is finally the Android version since Material Design that says, okay, let's mature this thing. Let's make sure, let's maximize the user experience. It feels like Lollipop brought Material Design, and it introduced this new paradigm. And then Marshmallow, honestly, I don't think Marshmallow did much to me as a user, especially because many of the things that Marshmallow brought, and I remember writing about this, I already had done on Lollipop through custom ROMs, through modifications, through applications, through Expose. So I didn't really care much about Marshmallow. But this stuff I really like because it's really polished, and it's polished on a level that encompasses both the user experience from a design standpoint, and also it's baked into the operating system in what I would assume is a very optimized way with no need for hooks and modifications.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to mention that Corey was building on was showing information-rich displays. And this is a pet peeve of mine, and probably anybody who owns a Nexus 6. And I really hope this makes it to the final releases. We're finally able to scale our DPIs on our displays without having to do root.
Well, no, come on. You don't have to do root. You can do it for terminal with shell commands.
Yeah, and then you break Android Pay support. And that was my thing. It was like, well, do I want to use Android Pay and have full CTS compatibility, or do I want to have a smaller display? So this is huge for me. It looks like it changes. I think the Nexus 6 was 560 or 580 as its default DPI. It looks like it changes it somewhere around the order of 500 to 490, so it might go native. But that's huge. And then also for Nexus 6 users, we've kind of been left out of the ability to calibrate our displays like the Nexus 6P, and actually the 5X just got in the new March release. But now there is a new calibrate display in System UI Tuner that, again, I hope lasts, because it gives pretty much, you can't change gamma and stuff like you can on some kernels like Franco and Lean, but you do have the ability to adjust your red, green, blue. So that, again, is another huge thing for poorly calibrated displays, or for individuals who just like, they like their displays tuned a little bit differently. And the night mode too, I'm trying to get it to kick on. The night mode, I don't know if you mentioned this or not, it does include, there we go. Woo! Volume's up. The night mode I just kicked on. It goes ahead and makes the display dim, but it also allows you to, that new night shift thing that iOS has, where it pulls back the blue colors on your display.
Yeah,
it also has that
as
well.
Too, on my custom
with adjusting the tint, you can see everything has like a more orangey tint. I should have done this before because you can actually see what's on my phone now instead of being all washed out like it was earlier. But a couple other things that I noticed about Android N so far. I like these suggestions on top. I think these are going to be really powerful for new users, reminding you to set certain things. Also, not letting you to forget about certain things. Let me go back into settings. After setting Do Not Disturb, you've got Do Not Disturb is set on. I believe if you have long display timeouts and things, it's just kind of alerting you, hey, these are things you might want to check out. Your device might not work as you intended because you forgot to change the setting. So I think like you said, this is what we've been waiting for material design. This is kind of seeing it's fully matured at this point. I hope there aren't going to be huge deal breakers. For Marshmallow and me, I don't like those. It doesn't kick in. It's not what it's advertised as, and the issues with turning off applications in the app standby and stuff, it's caused more headache for me than it's worth. And I haven't really seen a huge benefit. So I'm hoping they finally fix that. They say that Doze is going to kick in when the screen turns off. Maybe we'll see something similar to what Greenify is offering, where it'll kick off anything that's not using Google Cloud messaging. Which would be good, and if you can whitelist it like you can in the Galaxy S7, those would be some great power-saving features and things that would allow power users and non-power users to really get the most out of their devices. And instead of having Snapchat running in the background, eating up all your data and power.
So, in a few words, and I'm gonna write this at length. I'm gonna write about this at length tomorrow, but I think that Android N is definitely one of the smartest refinements that Google has ever brought to Android. I really like the fact that they're not focusing on gimmicks. From what we can see, they're not focusing on stuff that nobody has been asking for. They're asking for the stuff that everyone has been precisely asking for. Not Google Now on tap and not so many things, but finally, what people have been wanting for. Multi-window, dark mode, even night mode, which is there's a bit of demand for. Better notifications, all these customization, all of this information density, all these amazing things that I'm really very excited about this, and the fact that this came out of nowhere and it was just such a nice surprise. I'm really excited, and I really wish I hadn't sold my Nexus 5X. In fact, I don't, because if you guys remember the story, I sold it for $350. It was used, and literally 3 days later, Google dropped the price to $350, and now it's like $200 on that promotion. So I really, I don't wish I did, but oh my God, I really wish I did have a Nexus device right here to try it out. It's really good stuff, and I can't wait to check it out. I can't wait to learn everything about it and how it works. And man, I think that Google is finally listening to the users that want a better user experience.
You might say it's like the Galaxy S7 of Android releases. They took something that clearly had faults and problems, and they listened to the consumers, the power users, and are implementing a lot of those features and not really a whole lot of fluff on top of it.
Yeah,
well, we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I did get my Galaxy S7 shortly after yours, I think a day or two after the podcast got released. So I've got some impressions, and maybe we can do some updates on that. I think before we want to get started, though, Mario, did you have a giveaway to announce?
Oh, yeah, sure. So first of all, the winner of the OnePlus X giveaway that we held last week is going to be announced. It should be announced. It's going to be in the companion article. You can find the name there. Congratulations to the lucky winner. And other than that, we're also giving out 5 new devices. You can find the information in the companion article. But to sum it up, we're giving out 5 LED TV, LED 1 Pro. Well, now it's called LED Echo 1 Pro. So that's a very nice device. It's got a 2K display. It's got a Snapdragon 810. It's got 4 gigs of RAM. We're giving out 5 of those. All you have to do is go to the companion article once more, post about your impressions of Android N, and we'll pick 5 commenters at random that meet the criteria, which is comment about Android N and make sure to comment with a Discuss account that is tied to your XDA account or has the same username. If not, make sure to leave your XDA username so that we can contact you.
What about the last giveaway that we had last week, Mario?
What about it? I just said that the winner's going to be in the companion article.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't paying full attention.
Jeesh.
I thought you were still talking about today's giveaway.
No.
Well, one thing I can't help but pay attention to is the battery life on this Galaxy S7 Edge that I got. I was on very recent podcast episodes talking about the fact that it's got a higher capacity battery. That does not necessarily mean that it's going to perform significantly better. But I might have to eat my words a little bit. I'm telling you what, this device has been performing very well, at least for me, especially when in comparison to the Galaxy S6 that I've had in the past. I've been looking at my battery stats, and I certainly haven't been trying to limit my usage with it. I've been using it very much. In fact, when you get a new phone, you're going to be using it quite a bit more than you typically would, just as you're getting used to it. But to give you an example, my day yesterday, I unplugged it from the charger right when I got out of bed, and then used it all day long at work and got home. And then at midnight last night, it was still at 51% battery. Now, I understand that's circumstantial, but throughout the 4 days since I've owned this phone, it has not dropped below 35% battery, and I've been using the heck out of it. So far, initial impressions for me for this battery have been phenomenal.
Yeah, that's kind of I won't say that it's the opposite of my impressions. For me, I've had it for just over about a week and a half now, and I'm actually kind of disappointed with it, but it is still lasting me a whole day. It'll get me to about 30 or 40% by the time I head home from work. Now, mind you, I've said this before that I work in an area I have horrible signal. I'm bouncing. I'd probably say 30% of the time I have no signal. Text messages are pending, updates are pending, the whole 9 yards. So I'm in a worst case scenario, but I'm definitely not getting the battery that I thought I was going to see, but it is still lasting me the whole day with about 2.5 to 3.5 hours of screen on. So, it is lasting me, but I'm not, as sold on it. Like, I've never gotten to evening at 50%. I'm usually at 50% by like 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. So on that note, Corey, you mentioned that you might have to eat your words. I don't think so. I mean, it's a pretty sizable increase. First of all, it's a pretty sizable increase. And I honestly don't think that, from what I've seen at 5-6 hours screen on time, it is pretty good. But I don't think it's really, the most sizable increase you could have. Then again, on the Note 5, I also could get 5 hours screen on time without much problem. I think it ultimately boils down to the efficiency of the components and the drain that the software has coupled with those components. I know for a fact that Samsung Screen has only gotten more efficient. At this point, it's probably a very diminishing return, but it's definitely gotten more efficient. I mean, that's what Samsung does. As far as the processor, Snapdragon 820, there's still plenty of testing to be done. We already did some testing at XDA, which we'll discuss in a moment. But for increasing from the Note 5 at least 600 milliamp hours, I'm not sure. Is it really a sizable increase? Because keep in mind it's 1/5 of the battery right there, right?
Right. And to be fair, I'm coming from the Galaxy S6 Edge, which had pretty poor battery life. So
right.
I'm used to using that phone for a year, upgrading to this S7 Edge, and now it's got decent battery life. To me, it's like, whoa, this battery life is amazing. But
right.
Temper that a little bit with my previous experience with these Samsung Edge devices.
Yeah, but ultimately, what I was getting to is that there's so many factors with battery drain. For example, I just flashed. Just last week, I flashed a new ROM for my OnePlus 2, and I'm seeing 5-6 hours screen on time. Where on Oxygen OS, I could barely hit 4. And the system, I've shown you guys, the system is so much smoother. It's probably one of the smoothest ROMs I've ever tried. It's ridiculous. It's butter. And, it has great battery life. So there's obviously a lot of things that that you can always optimize for battery life, and usage always varies among users. I personally, with my usage, I consider 5 to 6 screen on time hours to be really good battery life. With other devices like the Nexus 5X, They didn't really last not even 4 hours for me, and that was a pity and one of the reasons why I sold it. But if the phone can last 5 hours, 6 hours with my usage, which usually involves very little sleep time, because I'm constantly waking my phone from the notifications from work, and I'm constantly even editing documents, reading, messaging, coordinating, going on sheets, going on docs, even having to watch videos for my job. That's part of my job description, apparently, to stay up to date. I typically clock out with 4 hours screen on time by the time I plug the phone at night. So if it survives that, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, and we were talking about the Samsung efficiency on their screens, and their screens are, like we were saying, they've gotten so efficient recently. I've got about 3 hours and 15 minutes of screen on time. It's just after midnight right now, and it's been off the charger since about 7 o'clock this morning. So I've gotten my good usage out of it, but when you look at the milliamp hours used by the screen, and I hope this is accurate, I've had always on display off today, but it's used only 534 milliamp hours, and that's with adaptive screen brightness on, and I have my slider set right at about 50% in the middle, so it's decently bright. I'm not working on a dim display or anything. So for it to use a seventh of the battery is used by the screen, that is a night and day difference from what we used to see in the past, where that was the huge factor for battery drain. I think a lot of people share my concerns with seeing Android system at the top of the battery usage. It's 33% of my total usage, an hour and 3 minutes of stay awake. Almost 4 hours of CPU usage is what's being rated here, with 1,423 milliamp hours. So it's almost 3 times the amount that my screen has been used for something in Android system. I've never seen a device with that kind of drain, and it kind of bothers me. But being this is the Qualcomm chip, and fortunately I've got the T-Mobile model, and Corey, you do too. Hopefully some developers will come out. We'll probably end up using Samsung Pay support, but we could actually see some pretty outrageous battery life once developers get a hang of this thing and start removing a lot of TouchWiz and figure out what that drain was if Samsung doesn't find out what it was first.
And hey, you can also get AOSP ROMs. It's very likely that you'll see an AOSP ROM really soon.
Exactly. So I tend to avoid them. For me personally, I don't get the same stability for wireless connectivity because, like I said, I'm usually in a low network area. So whenever I run AOSP, I always have problems with staying connected to towers, text messages not going through. Right. MMS is usually broken. I'll probably give it a shot for sure, try a CM or something. It would
certainly be nice to see what Samsung hardware finally can do. I mean, the 2015, we missed out on seeing that, and seeing what Samsung hardware can do. But then again, Samsung hardware right now is just going to be the same hardware that most other people are going to have. The Snapdragon 820, 4 gigs of RAM. Speaking of the Snapdragon 820, some of you might have noticed that on XDA we posted a hands-on, in-depth testing of the Snapdragon 820 on the S7. It's very important to S7 Edge. It's very important to make the distinction that the results that we obtained are not representative of the nature of the Snapdragon S7 of the Snapdragon 820. I'm stuttering here. They're not representative of the nature of the Snapdragon 820, but they're representative of the package of the S7 Edge, which has a Snapdragon 820. So we can't really extrapolate the results and say the Snapdragon 820 throttles, the Snapdragon 820 gets hot. But what we found is that the S7 Edge actually gets hotter than the Note 5, and it gets about as hot as the Moto X Pure in our testing. You can head over to xdadevelopers.com. We'll also leave a link in the descriptions. We have thermal images. We've kept track of the temperature, and we have the benchmarks that we use to test and the score, so you can see how it throttles. So it turns out that our results say that it doesn't throttle much on the CPU side, which is awesome because the Snapdragon 810 throttle quite a bit in the CPU side. In fact, you can see that in the scores that we have over there. But it did throttle in the GPU test. We used 3D Mark, which is very intensive. If I'm not wrong, I think that their motto is that if it's not a benchmark unless you really push it to the maximum, and that's what they try to do, at least on mobile. So those results I think are pretty impressive. Of course, we're still testing the device, and we're going to have a very, very in-depth, 10-page review very soon, eventually, hopefully, soon, trademark. But what are your thoughts, guys, on the performance of Snapdragon 820, throttling, heat, all of that?
Yeah. So one thing that a lot of people are conjecturing with is with the heat pipe, the controversial heat pipe in the phone.
Here we go.
Right. Does this have any bit of impact in terms of how hot the device is going to get? Is the fact that the entire device is warming up mean that there's actually better heat transfer away from the CPU, which in turn has more surface area exposed, allowing the device to cool off quicker? And something that anecdotally I can contribute to it is using the Gear VR headset, which again is just a phenomenal deal for this phone. When I had the Galaxy S6 Edge, something that you'd experience quite a bit, you'd be using it for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it would overheat. And it would overheat so much that a system prompt would come up saying, hey, you got to take a break. We're too hot. You got to cool the phone down. And it would be hot to the touch. The Galaxy S7 Edge is actually not nearly as quick to overheat. I actually haven't seen the message myself, but I've seen reports on Reddit of people still seeing the message. But they're saying it's taking about twice as long before they get to that point. The performance of the 820, which is what you were asking about, also is noticeable in certain difficult VR programs such as the game Drift, where you're flying around in 3D. I'm noticing dramatic performance increases on those VR applications as well.
Great.
Yeah, and speaking about the heat pipe, you can actually feel the heat pipe, when the device starts heating up. We've seen the teardowns from iFixit.
Yeah.
And we know the battery is in this general area over here, with the SoC is located down here, and the heat pipe runs up here. And when it starts getting warm, you can start to feel it just above the Samsung logo, warm across the strip on the side of the phone.
Yeah, go look at the thermal images. What you're describing, I have it on the screen right now. It matches up perfectly.
Yep.
Yeah, we noticed that as well.
And there was a report, I wanted to kind of tackle this one. There was a report of a particular YouTuber coming out and saying that there was no liquid in the heat pipe. iFixit did find that there were a couple of grams of liquid inside of the heat pipe. So this is technically a liquid-cooled heat pipe. We don't know all of these specifics that go into how much is needed for how long the pipe is, how thick the pipe is, how much heat they're looking at dissipating. So there is liquid inside of this heat pipe. It's not just there for show. It's not just a passive system. It's actually dispersing the heat that gets contained within it. And, initially when I set it up, it got a little bit of warm, but it really hasn't gotten hot since I've used it. Right. But again, I don't use it for super intensive things either. I'm not playing Grand Theft Auto on it or, anything like that.
Yeah, well, what we found is that running 3D Mark, the device only got to 99 Fahrenheit, which is about 37.2 Celsius, which was actually, just a little bit less hot than the 6S Plus. Now, the Nexus 6P surprisingly didn't throttle as much in 3D Mark. I'm guessing it's because it's the Snapdragon 810 CPU and not the Adreno 420 that had issues with throttling. And this is a very GPU intensive test. But it was really on the CPU side that we saw that it really didn't get warm at all. Well, it didn't really get noticeably warm, and it got as warm as the Note 5, which as far as CPU test goes, the Note 5 was remarkably efficient. I noted this in my review. The Note 5, you could run so many consequent benchmarks on it, and it just wouldn't go down. The score wouldn't go have like a stratified drop like in other devices, like 808 or 810 devices. So that I think is really nice to see, and it could be just that that it's a heat pipe that's working. It could be a Snapdragon 820 is actually very efficient. It could be that the system is not really getting pushed that much, but overall, it's definitely better than the Snapdragon 810. Even when it throttles, it's still much better than the Adreno 420. Like much better. So, I think that it's fine. At this point, it's fine. When it throttles, it's still much better. The 3D Mark scores still show it to be much better, even when it's as throttle as we could manage to get it. I think I might actually be content. I think that we can finally stop all the silly puns about heat in Snapdragon 810 comments and titles and whatnot. Finally, those need to die.
Definitely. So if I have to sum up my experience with this phone so far, The display is phenomenal. It's one of the best things about the phone. It has been for a while. The battery, like I mentioned, is performing extremely well. The hardware is great. The build quality of this device is very good. It feels like a premium device. The slopes that are all over the device, on the sides, on the back, on the top and the bottom, I wasn't even expecting that sliding in from the top of the phone, you're getting a little bit of a curve up there too. Just a really nice fit and finish to this phone. Still have the problems with TouchWiz, right? I'm still noticing bugs where there's a lot of lag in the screen occasionally. Sometimes YouTube video will freeze on me. The actual video will freeze while the video continues going. The settings menu might freeze on me. Little hiccups. Certainly nothing to sour the experience of the device. It's something as a TouchWiz user, quite frankly, that I've gotten used to. It's part of the deal. The SD card slot is phenomenal to have. I toss in a SanDisk 200 gigabyte card into that, and unlike Daniel, unlike Daniel was mentioning last week, I actually haven't experienced any issues with that. Unseating and coming up with dialogues each time I open up that camera application. I popped it in there the first day I got the device, and it's been connected ever since and mounted to the device. So that's been working extremely well. Camera is definitely a nice improvement from the S6. Not much of an improvement, but that's because the S6 was already so good. Note 5 as well. The only downside I would say on that is people are noticing the front-facing camera has a slight degradation in quality when you compare it to the S6 Edge, which is a bit surprising, but I'm not using that as much as the rear-facing camera. All in all, a phenomenal package, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I echo those words as well. In my week and a half of having the phone, I've been thoroughly impressed with it. Like you said, the hardware is top notch. I had an iPhone 6S. I've had my Nexus 6 for a while, and even compared to the iPhone, you may get people complaining that the ports the holes don't line up at the top and they're not symmetrical at the bottom. Those little nitpicks aside, it is a beautiful piece of hardware. It feels fantastic in your hand. It feels much smaller than a 5.5 inch device, which the iPhone 6 Plus is, and it's ginormous compared to this.
Ginormous compared to anything.
And I am very impressed with the hardware. Going into the software, it's something that everybody does really quickly is complain about TouchWiz and this and that about TouchWiz. That's something that you get. You're never going to get an absolutely perfect device. We saw it with the Nexus 6P. Everybody thought it could be the perfect device, but now that time has gone on, you're noticing that the camera is still the standard Google janky camera. And there are a couple of other issues that the device is having as well. So I don't think we're ever going to find that perfect medium device. And TouchWiz brings us a lot of really nifty features. I love the edge panel. I love the edge tasks, the edge lighting. All of those are really fun to play with. The camera is second to none, even in software. I mean, HTC used to lead the pack in software for its camera, but Samsung has just blown it out of the water. It's super easy to use. A lot of you guys probably don't know, but I'm a videographer and video editor by trade, and using this is very similar to some of the more professional cameras that I use, with being able to dial in exactly what you want to shoot, and it does it. And that's impressive. And the quality, the focus speed, everything about it, you're really not going to be let down by the camera on this phone. And going back to software, you have a UI lag here. Something might happen odd here or there. But I've had the same problem with my Nexus 6. I think it's something that Android inherently has, that TouchWiz just accelerates how fast you actually see it.
Well, it shouldn't have it. But I mean, if you're going to argue about this, at this point, it shouldn't have it.
It shouldn't.
When you're saying, it's like, well, I bought this $800 phone and it has less stutters than I expected. You're talking about an $800 phone. You know what I mean? Yeah. So at this point, it shouldn't have it at all, especially after Jelly Bean, Kit Kat, Lollipop, Marshmallow. All of them brought in incremental upgrades to performance. You have Project Spell, Project Butter, you name it.
Yeah. And, I mean, if you want to spend $800 on a phone and get a stutter-free performance, you're going to get something with an Apple on the back. I mean, point blank, I'm going to be free to admit that. I see it as you're kind of baking with a dented cake pan. Android is a dented cake pan. It has problems with, UI being smooth. That's why we always see the GPU profiling and seeing how this device compares to that device. And even stock Android devices drop frames from time to time. So you're building on a dented cake pan, and TouchWiz just kind of exemplifies some of those issues. But like I said, as far as everything, I am incredibly satisfied. Call quality is second to none. The display is just absolutely gorgeous. The fingerprint sensor, I don't think it's as fast as it was on the Galaxy S6. And it's definitely not as quick as the iPhone 6s, but it's fast enough for 99% of use cases. But otherwise, I've been really happy with it, and I'll be definitely playing with Android and on my Nexus 6, but I'll definitely miss the Galaxy S7 Edge, which is something I didn't say about the Galaxy S6.
Right.
I got rid of that device within about 3 months. The battery issues, and it was a janky mess after a short bit. But I haven't seen that yet with the S7.
Yeah. So a point that I want to raise about both performance and TouchWiz and Samsung and Knox, I find myself at a crossroads and kind of a dilemma. It's the fact that finally we get a Snapdragon 820 on top-end Samsung hardware. You put stock Android on that phone, and it's going to be the most premium stock Android phone there is. It would be, they would have the best hardware of any phone plus stock Android. At the same time, you would lose Samsung Pay. And even if you don't want to put stock Android, even if you would just want to flash a custom ROM, unless they come up with a way to bypass Knox, which, there's always a way in the early days of a new Samsung device. Well, not always, but, last year we saw ping pong root or whatever to not trip Knox with the rooting the device. And before that, we had other ways of avoiding Knox. But what I'm saying is I want root on that phone because I want to be able to optimize it. Now, you say that it's a problem with Android. It is, but it's a problem with Google's Android and OEM's Android because they have to optimize it in a way that it's stable enough for the general populace. When I flash custom ROMs, ultimately, I know that I can find a custom ROM that is smoother and faster than whatever the phone came with. Some of them might be bad, some of them might be unstable, but ultimately I know that if I keep flashing and following the development, eventually I'm going to stumble upon a ROM that is really, really smooth and it's really, really fast. And this happened on Note 5, perhaps not really, really, but it was certainly much faster than stock. And the Note 4, and I'm talking about TouchWiz now. So that's kind of what I think is sad about this phone, is that we finally see the Snapdragon 820, but at the same time, Samsung gives us such a big reason not to do this because of Samsung Pay, which is so useful, and it's only going to grow bigger, and it's just a pity to lose that. Ideally, it would be like Android Pay, where you can just restore the original ROM, get rid of root, get rid of everything, and get it going again. But it's not going to be that easy. And ultimately, I think that's what's going to be holding me back from really tinkering with that phone, at least during the first months. And like you said, realize its full potential.
Yeah, and one last thing I wanted to say about that, along the lines of what you were saying, is I think Samsung has given us the least amount of reasons to hate TouchWiz. With the Galaxy S7, I think it seems to run smoother. It seems to handle its RAM management better than it did before, and it gives us a great camera and a lot of bonus features on top of that most phones aren't going to see till Android N with multi-window and stuff like that. So, they've given us less reason that, it kind of sucks to say stock, but it's not as bad as it used to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think we've done a really good job of summing up our experiences having this Galaxy S7 Edge for roughly a week or so. And then, really the big news this week was Android N, going over a lot of the new features here, and really impressed with what we're seeing. The multitasking support, Android N is really taking the platform and maturing it and making sure that it's built for the devices that we're seeing now, which are very premium, as we've talked about with this Galaxy S7 Edge. So we'll make sure to keep an eye on the developer preview. Hopefully we get to see a lot of these features that we've discussed today in the final version of Android N. I know in the past some of those features don't always make the cut, so take what we've discussed today with a grain of salt, but we're certainly going to keep our eye on that. But with that, we're going to wrap it up for this week. I'm Corey Fiak. As I mentioned, you can find me on Twitter at Codismsdev, where I just put a couple sample pictures of the photos that I've been able to take with this Galaxy S7 Edge, one of which was a silly picture. It's of the speedometer of my car. But if you look at it, it's a macro image. It's got deep inky blacks. It's phenomenal what this camera can do. So make sure to check that out.
And Daniel Lorchena, you can find me on Reddit at Ultimax98. Pretty much everywhere I have the handle Ultimax98, including Twitter. And if you guys have any more questions about either Android N or the Galaxy S7, I'm always interested in your questions. I know a lot of you guys hit me up last week regarding that. And I am going to be doing a review on the Galaxy S7, a video review for YouTube, but I'm going to take my time on it because a lot of the issues with the Galaxy S6 didn't surface till a couple of weeks after use. So I'll probably wait about a month and a half before I do my review to really see if the software is going to hold up. So definitely stay tuned for that and follow me on Twitter for more updates with that.
And I'm Mario Serafero, editor-in-chief at XDAdevelopers.com. You can find me on XDA. Usually writing a couple times a week. If not, I'm always editing behind the scenes. We have many great things coming to XDA this week. We've got articles on the S7, articles on Android N, my personal full-fledged analytical opinion on this whole thing. And, of course, don't forget about our giveaway. The winner of the last giveaway, his name is going to be in the companion article. And then you can also find the details for the new giveaway on the companion article as well.